What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where me and my good friend that's in that little bubble over there, Danny, Dr. Zayas GOD, often go into our mother's apartments and record reviews of movies. I'm usually the one in my mom's apartment recording. Danny's in his. And I can't think of a better movie for Danny to talk about around his mom than Red Rooms.
Ooh, yeah.
Danny, I want you to go into the story of how you saw this movie in a second, but I just wanted to give a shout out to my friend Megan Stockton. Megan's been on this channel a couple of times before, and she wrote a really great book called Blue Jay. And this movie reminds me of Blue Jay a lot. If you guys like this movie, I would recommend going to check out her book. It deals a lot with the depravity that's in our world, where like you can't believe how awful humanity can be. And I think that that's a big part of this movie. So, Danny, it can be like kind of difficult to watch, difficult to read. So you saw this though in a crowded theater, right?
Yeah. I have a membership to IFC Center in the West Village, and I get emails and I always check what's coming up. They do a bunch of director Q&As, and they do host a lot of foreign films and a lot of genre films. And I just happened to notice that this movie was playing. I read the description. I said, okay, that sounds interesting. And one of the prominent quotes was that is featured on the movie poster for this is, "It out-Finchers Fincher." So yeah. I was like, okay, I love Seven, Fight Club, Zodiac, big David Fincher fan. His greatest film, Alien 3, and I also noticed that the writer-director Pascal Plante was going to be there for a Q&A. So I said, all right, screw it. It's my last week of the summer. I'll go. School hasn't really started yet. I'm going to go and check this out. I ended up bumping into a whole bunch of like horror community people who I see at a lot of these events. And this movie, I had really no idea what I was walking into. And I sat there maybe as uncomfortable as I've ever been in a movie theater watching this movie.
Wow.
To the point where like several times in the movie, I like was putting my hands over my mouth and like whispering, "Oh, come on, get the fuck, what the fuck? Come on, what the fuck is going on?"
Yeah.
Like as I'm watching it, I like goosebumps. And I want to preface this by saying this is not in any way a traditional horror movie. In fact, I don't even know if I would even classify this. I mean, I'm going to classify this as a horror movie because we're talking about it on our channel.
Right.
And because, as you said, it does deal with real life depravity and like absolutely horrific things. But this is much more in the vein of like a true crime story. But it's the way that it's done is so interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me so uncomfortable so quick. And the more I learned about the characters and the more the movie reveals what it's actually about, the more uncomfortable and unnerved I got. And when the movie ended, I was just like, thank God.
Yep.
And the director did his Q&A. I recorded it, and a lot of times I'll record the Q&As and I'll post them on our channel.
Yeah.
But a lot of his Q&A was like spoiler heavy.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to post that because I figured, let me post a short review of it, which spoiler free is up on the channel. And maybe I can get Pete to watch it and talk about it. And we can kind of get people to see this movie. And that way, you know, before it gets spoiled.
Yep. What's interesting about this movie in general, right, is that it's okay. On our channel, we actually don't cover that many movies or shows where it's all about like the jump scares, right? But we cover a wide range of things. There's that tension when you're watching a suspenseful horror movie where you're like, oh, I'm scared something's going to jump out at me. You have that tension. This movie's tension is based upon the fact you're like, they're going to show me something that I'm not going to be able to get out of my mind. That's the tension that you have throughout this entire movie. You're like, when they show me something, it's gonna like just haunt me and it's gonna be hard to get out of my mind. Now, I don't want to spoil anything yet. We'll get into spoilers in a minute, but I think that that's an interesting sensation to have, that you're gonna see something that be able to shake. Now, I think that I think about that movie Terrifier and Terrifier 2 that we often joke about on this channel, and how there's these like explicit long scenes where someone is just being mutilated and killed and tortured, and horror fans seem to like really eat that up and love those movies, right? I think what makes this worse than that is that you're like, yep, this probably exists, like this probably is happening right now. And I think that is as horrible as Terrifier is to watch. It's like, oh fuck, I have to watch this now and think about how fucking horrible the world is.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that this movie deals with the kidnap, torture, and murder of girls that are of very similar ages to our daughters.
Correct.
So before we get into spoiler territory, I'll give you the quick, like, back of the box summary of this movie.
Sure.
It starts out as a courtroom drama, and the opening of this movie is an absolutely insane, almost 20-minute uncut tape.
Yep.
Inside of a courtroom, from the people filing in to the opening statements by both the prosecutor and the defense attorney. It's a case involving an accused serial killer, Chevalier, played by Maxwell McCabe Locos, who just sits there looking like the creepiest human being you've ever seen. I don't think he says a word, maybe a word in the entire movie.
Yeah.
And we find out from the prosecutor and the defense attorney that he is accused of murdering 3 young girls between the ages of, I think it's 16 and 13, and recording their graphic murders in his garage / red room.
Right.
And then selling those videos on the dark web.
Yep.
And this is a French Canadian movie. It's filmed in Montreal.
Right.
And so the movie starts, he's in like a glass cage.
Yep.
Almost like he's on display in the courtroom. And the prosecutor and the defense attorney, in this, again, incredible near 20-minute uncut take, give their opening statements to the jury. And we don't know, and we think from that opening scene that this is going to be a courtroom procedural, that it's going to be about the trial. And it turns out that the movie is not about the trial as much as it is about these 2 women who are in the gallery watching the trial. They are not members of the family. They are there for different reasons. And the movie ends up being about these 2 women, the unlikely bond that they share,
right, and
the darker reasons why they are showing up to court every day,
right.
And that's if that intrigues you, walk away from this video. Go. So I want to point this out. Red Rooms is actually coming back to the IFC Center. So if you live in New York City, I think it's in IFC for like this week. September 6th was yesterday. I think it was back in IFC as of yesterday. So you can
Yeah.
still go, if you live in the New York area, you can still go and see this in theaters. And I highly recommend doing that. And then you can come back and watch the rest of this review where we will eventually get into spoilers.
Right, right, right. So before we get into spoilers, I kind of want to just piggyback on what you were saying. You know, you said before that this movie out Fincher's Fincher. We have to talk about the filmmaking in this movie, like the way that this film is made, because you talk about that opening sequence in the courtroom, which had me intrigued immediately. Um, so much of this movie, so much of the horror and the tension of this movie is based like just solely on dialogue, right? People describing things versus like showing it, right? Now, besides that, so much of this filmmaking in this movie is people's reactions to things and the use of sound, because like there's a lot of this movie which is very similar to what's behind us right now, where it is the main character just looking at a screen, and you have a lot of sequences in this movie where the main character is like doing things on a screen, and in a normal movie or a TV show, you might have the main character like sort of saying things as it's happening, like as they're doing things on the screen, just so that there's that not you're not like forced to just read and watch somebody click on things. Like that might be like, oh, that's a good idea, or like, oh no, I can't believe I did that. They'll say that kind of shit while they're clicking on stuff, but there's nothing like that. It makes the movie seem so much more mature and adult than so many of the things that we cover and so many of the things that we watch, because everything in this movie seems utterly realistic. Like this could happen in the real world. This is the way that this person would act, and I always have so much respect for filmmakers that treat their audiences like they're mature people versus having to like hold their hands and guide them through things, or to put in reactions to things just so that, like, you know, because when we see a character react to something, it affects us on an emotional level. But we're dealing with a character that kind of borders on sociopath in this movie, and she doesn't have a lot of reactions to truly horrible things. So I think it's a very
I would take I would not say she borders on.
yeah. Well, so do you want to jump into spoilers then and kind of
Well,
explain what we're talking about?
before we get into spoilers, I just want to make a comparison to another movie, a movie that. So last year there was a movie nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards called Anatomy of a Fall. Anatomy of a Fall is a French film about
Yeah.
a woman who is on trial for murdering her husband, and she claims that it was an accident and that he, fell to his death. And the thing that this movie does so great is that it never reveals itself. It gives you the courtroom drama, and you get the evidence from both sides, and you never get a definitive, she did it, she didn't do it. So it leaves you walking out of the movie, and you go out to the bar and you're just talking about, oh my God, what do you think? But what I loved about it is because it's a French film, the movie takes place in a French courtroom. We've all grown up on Law and Order and these procedural dramas on TV and 12 Angry Men. We know how the American court system works. So I was fascinated by looking at, now that I'm saying French, now I'm thinking I think it was either French or Dutch. But looking at the court system in another country.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, this movie starts and I was just instantly hooked. First, by the fact that the camera just followed everything.
Right.
And second, because we're in a foreign country. Yes, it's Canada, but it's French Canada, so it's a little bit more foreign.
Right.
We're in a Montreal court, and we're seeing how a Montreal court is different than an American court. And it is. It's very, like, there's subtle differences. And it's just interesting the way it hooks you. So this movie instantly reminded me of Anatomy of a Fall.
Okay.
And then later on, this movie takes a deep, dark shift to reminding me of Uncut Gems.
Okay.
Did you see Uncut Gems?
Uncut Gems is one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah, in my short review, I said this movie felt like Anatomy of a Fall meets Uncut Gems. I
Okay.
think when we get into spoilers and I go into more depth on that, I think you'll see that, especially if you really enjoyed Uncut Gems.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Also, the way that I felt towards the end of the movie, the tension and the suspense that I was feeling as a film viewer was very similar between Uncut Gems and the end of this film. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
so, but yeah, so if I think 15, probably 16 minutes in now, if you want to go and start getting into spoilers and we could talk about these two women and
Yeah.
their motivations. And okay, so we're
Yeah.
going to officially spoiler warning now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that one last movie that we can compare it to, and this might be a slight spoiler too, is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, right? Because
The
good.
director brought that up. I think the director brought that up in his Q&A that that was one of the movies, even though he wasn't. That's another Fincher film. Well, the remake is a Fincher film,
Right.
And,
Right, and
yeah.
all those books, those movies are based on books. It's a whole series, and they follow this one main character, Lisbeth Salander, and she interacts with other characters too. And there's Bloomquist, who's one of the main guys. That's who Daniel Craig plays in the movie. But the reason why there's a comparison between this and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is because the girl is a hacker in that, and she's like uncovering things and doing all this research, and a lot of the book is like following her doing research into things, like learning things that like the general public doesn't know exists. That's a big thing in this. And then there's also that sort of that dark, seedy, corrupt world that we're just blind to, but that they go into in all of those books too. They're like, oh, this horrible shit's happening like down the block in that one building that you don't know what's in that building. So that's why I got that vibe from this. And I actually really like those Lisbeth Salander books. And I like the Daniel Craig version of that movie and the original one with I think it's like
Numi Rapace.
Yeah. So I mean, I was on board for this just based on that. But what did the director say about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in this?
Just that, like, making the connections of like how he wanted to have the hacking and like that real world seediness to things. I think it's funny that he said he said he loves David Fincher, but he wasn't trying to make a Fincher-esque movie. And that I think he said that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is an interesting one because he obviously Fincher remade that. But he was thinking more of the original with Numi Rapace.
Gotcha. So why don't you tell me what you think about the main character, since we're in spoilers now?
So first of all, the two actresses in this movie are absolutely fantastic. Laurie Beben, who plays Clementine, who I know that was an interesting character for you. You have a daughter named Clementine.
Right.
But the star of this movie, and like literally 1A and 1B with Willa Fitzgerald and Strange Darling for my favorite female performance of the year, is Juliette Gariepe. I don't know if I'm saying that right. She plays the lead. She plays Kellyanne. And what we find out about this woman, well, first of all, what I love is the dichotomy of these two characters. Clementine is poor. She is there because she is one of these women who like has an emotional bond to the serial killer. She's, and Pascal Plante brought up like he was fascinated by like these women who fall in love with the serial killers. And if you've watched any of these like Netflix documentaries, the women who wanted to, hook up with the Night Stalker, and they wanted to hook up with Ted Bundy, and like, there's this bizarre subculture of women who love these serial killers. And she is one of them. She's like poor. She shows up to the court every day. she kind of sleeps outside, waiting so that she can be first in line, so that she can get in, hoping that he's found not guilty, and so that she can, consummate their relationship, later on. Whereas Juliette Garieppe plays Kellyanne, who's the complete opposite. She's wealthy, she's tall and statuesque. She's a model, and she's I guess, like Jennifer Tilly style semi-pro poker player, where like her main job is she's a model, but then she plays like high stakes Bitcoin poker, where she's playing for Bitcoin. And there's also something incredibly dark about her, where she is, in these online forums on this, in the dark web, and she's, doing things and, contacting people, and we don't really know what role she has. We don't know why she's in that courtroom every day. The movie starts where the camera focuses in on her as she's staring at Chevalier, the accused serial killer.
Right.
And my first thought is, okay, she's an escaped victim and she's there for revenge.
Right.
No. And then you start to your mind starts to race. Okay, so why is she there?
Mm-hmm.
Clementine, we figure out very quickly, she thinks he's not guilty and has that weird infatuation. Kellyanne, though, is this mystery for most of the movie until probably the last third of the movie, when we really start to see what kind of sick game she is playing on her end.
Right.
So again, let me take it back to the plot of the movie. Is this guy is on trial for murder,
right,
and he is accused of murdering 3 people, 3 young girls, 16 to 13.
right.
Two of the girls, the videos that he uploaded to the dark web have been they've been acquired by the police.
Yeah.
And they are played in the courtroom. And another amazing thing that Pascal Plante does, and this goes back to you mentioned the sound design. The movie does not show us the tapes. This is not Terrifier. We're not watching Art the Clown conduct a, show of vicious murder.
Right.
We see very little of what's on the videos, but we hear it. We hear the screaming. We hear the parents in the gallery hysterical. We see it through a doorway, somebody passing out from what they've experienced.
Right.
But there's only 2 of the videos. The youngest victim, the video of her murder has not been retrieved yet. And so that is still up for that's a big part of it, is we don't know what happened. And so Clementine is obsessed with seeing these videos. She wants to see the videos so that she can know that Chevalier is not guilty, which is just, and Kellyanne is somehow they have this weird bond. They start eating lunch together at the courtroom. That becomes, oh, you don't have any place to sleep. All right, if you want, come back to my apartment.
Right.
She has the most updated version of Siri or Alexa, called Danielle, I think.
Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. And they have this bizarre bond where I thought the whole movie, I'm Kellyanne is just keeping this woman around so that she could kill her and sell her corpse.
Right.
Which the movie doesn't get that far, but so the movie is about finding out about these videos, and the third and final video is a major part of the final, I guess, third of this movie.
Right.
And we find out I guess I'll kind of do the big reveal now. We find out that Kellyanne she is like a gambler of like dark web stuff. And
Right.
she is playing high stakes poker to build up the amount of money she has so that she can win an auction to get this final red room video that
Right.
shows the murder of the young girl. And and the dark web, the people on the dark web who she makes contact with, basically, in order for her to even be accepted into this auction, she has to, I guess, prove her loyalty in some way. And so she does some absolutely fucking depraved things that I'm telling you, you felt. There's a couple moments in this movie where you felt, it's very rare. And you know how many times I go to movie theaters.
Yes.
I have almost never felt an entire movie theater grown in uncomfortability as when she shows back up in the courtroom. One of the things that they require of her is that she comes into the courtroom dressed as the youngest girl. And so she comes in, Juliette Garieppe is this tall, statuesque brunette. The picture is behind us. We've watched her modeling career. She's absolutely stunning. And she comes in a blonde wig. She puts this fake braces on her teeth. She gets the outfit of the private school that the girl goes to. And she dresses as this girl in front of the girl's family. And she's like immediately like pounced upon and told to like leave the courthouse. And her career, like, and we're watching her career fall apart.
Implode.
Like, yeah, like the modeling agency is like, we can't book you anymore. And there's like, we get this idea that now she's being watched by people outside. Like, what is she involved? Did she murder this girl? What's going on?
Right. Yeah, that sequence, we really should focus on that sequence for a second, because that's maybe the most powerful moment in the whole movie, is when she dresses up like one of the murder victims at the trial. Because, you know, we see her with the wig on before she goes to the trial. Then she's sitting there in the courtroom and she puts on she reveals that she has the uniform on. She puts on the braces. And the sound design for that moment is so smart, because like it's like a music cue, like music cues that we're used to in horror movies, where it might just be this sort of like electronic metallic sound where it's like in a jump scare kind of moment, but it's the girl's fucking scream that we've heard before, where the girl is being murdered, and they're just doing that as like a music cue while this main character is just like looking ahead at the audience essentially, but she's looking at the killer in his cage, and she's got this crazy smile on her face with her braces teeth, and just that sound over that, and seeing like the mother of the victim's reaction, seeing the courtroom's reaction, seeing the killer's reaction. I mean, that scene, I think that's the scene that had the most impact on me in the whole movie.
I'm telling you, you felt the entire theater shift in their seat and kind of go like, oh. And the score, I want to bring this up because the director, Pascal Plante, made a big point of the score was done by his brother. And like he had a big conversation with his brother about exactly what kind of music he wanted. And that was like a big topic of the Q&A, like how effective the score in this movie is, how effective the sound design in this movie is. Because again, this movie doesn't really show you as much as you are listening to things. You're listening to those videos. You're listening to the reaction of the people in the gallery. You're listening to the reaction of people who are, it's just absolutely unnerving, I think is the best word to use when describing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that what makes this movie work for me is there's one word I think of. I think of restraint, right? Because they don't really show you anything, but yet it is super disturbing, and you have this emotional reaction.
It's
They
funny. The
yeah, go
director,
ahead.
I'm sorry, the director made a point. He's like, you know, I've shown this to people at and a lot of people are sitting there waiting to see the videos, and I'm sitting there going, what is wrong with you sickos?
Right, right, and that's my whole thing too. Because I mean, that brings up a whole point. You know me, like we kind of argue, not really argue, but we have issues with Terrifier, right? Where I'm kind of like, I had to turn off the second one. I haven't even seen the first one, but I was kind of like, why am I watching this, right? And I know, like, for some horror people, actually a lot of horror people, there's that idea of like, oh man, can you believe how fucked up this is? Like look how fucked up. Like it's almost like a badge of honor that you can watch something really fucked up, like Cannibal Holocaust and all this kind of stuff, right? Or the Serbian Child, or whatever the fuck that movie's called, right?
A Serbian film, yeah.
There you go, that too, yeah. And so, like, to me, I don't really get enjoyment, especially when it's like innocent people suffering. Like when it's like innocent people that they've done nothing and they're just being like mutilated and stuff. I'm like, I don't want to watch this. Like, I know this could happen. This could happen to my kid. You know, like the movie, one of the things that you've already mentioned before is that one of the main characters named Clementine. It didn't also help that, like, she kind of looks like my daughter Clementine. Like, if my daughter Clementine was to grow up, she might even kind of look like this girl in this movie. So I was always like reminded of that, and these teenage girls just being like butchered. And it's like, I don't want to fucking see that. Like, because I think it's like an empathy thing. It's like, I don't want to picture a person experiencing that, but most especially like an innocent person who's done
Yeah.
nothing, you know?
I think for me, there's a big distinction in like the type of movie I'm watching. If I'm watching Terrifier and Terrifier 2, I put those in the, you know, those are more intense slasher movies.
Right.
And so I don't want to watch a Friday the 13th movie where, you know, Jason doesn't kill anybody because,
Right.
oh, like, you know, I once worked at a summer camp and I empathize. Like, no, I'm watching these movies for a very specific reason. Like,
Right.
these are slasher movies. I want my fill, right?
Right. Right.
And that's why I unabashedly support Terrifier, Terrifier 2. I can't wait for Terrifier 3. This type of movie is completely different. Like you said, like Art the Clown is not real. He's like a pseudo supernatural slasher, and I'm not, as much as I hate clowns, I'm not scared of Art the Clown. I am terrified of my daughter, your daughter, you know, and something like this, which can and does happen in the real fucking world. You know, here we are. What was it? 2 days ago, there was another school shooting. So, you know, whenever you're talking about in the framework of using a word like horror or thriller or suspense, whenever you do get into things that can and we know do happen, it makes those movies more uncomfortable. Like there's a
Right.
catharsis in watching Terrifier 2 or Friday the 13th Part 4. There's a catharsis there because I'm just sitting there enjoying the mindless, not always mindless, but in many cases mindless slaughter and, like, you know, oh, final girl kills the bad guy. Great. This movie and movies like it, there is no final girl. There is no hero who is going to come out and rescue these teenage girls. They're dead.
They're
And
dead. Yeah.
their videos of their horrifying murders with their screams. There's actually, and I want to talk to it since we are like obviously deep into spoilers.
Yeah.
There's one of the most amazing scenes in this movie, and one of the most amazing aspects of this movie is we established that it's these two main female protagonists, Kellyanne and Clementine. And Clementine is the one who's, you know, obsessed with the killer. She loves him. She begs Kellyanne to let her watch one of the
Right.
videos.
Right.
And so what we're looking at as the viewer is from like behind the computer screen. We're watching Clementine as she watches this Red Room's video.
Right.
And again, we're hearing that awful sound, those awful screams. And then there's this amazing moment where Kellyanne, where Clementine stops, and she basically, everything has now changed, because now not only has she experienced this awful violence,
Yeah.
but she notices that Chevalier is in fact 100% the killer.
Right.
She sees his eyes in the video under the mask, and it instantaneously breaks the illusion for her, to
Right.
the point where at that moment I'm sitting there going, okay, this is where Kellyanne kills her. This is where, in a different movie, Kellyanne comes from behind, knife across the throat, but instead they have this one last interaction of like Clementine realizing what kind of sick fuck Kellyanne is, that she has these videos on her computer. And what is Kellyanne exactly? And before she can think too deeply about these, she says, no, I'm going home. And she leaves. And she leaves the movie. And with like a third of the movie left, one of our main characters just basically says, I'm done. Fuck it. I can't do this anymore. And she leaves.
Right.
And I thought that was such a powerful and such a brave thing as a filmmaker to do, because, and I think Pascal Plante made this point, that we were Clementine. We are that kind of normal person who's there, whatever her reasoning was. But she became the normal person at that moment.
Right.
And she realized, I have to separate myself from this and go home.
Yeah.
And Kellyanne, at that point now, does not have any person to kind of connect her back to any semblance of like reality. And she now becomes completely obsessed with this third video.
Right.
And doing whatever she now has to do to get this third video. And if that means dressing up as the girl in court, if that means breaking into the girl's house while her grieving parents are sleeping, going into the dead girl's bedroom, and in a moment that I swear to God made me almost as terrified as Toni Collette on the fucking wall in Hereditary.
Uh-oh. That's a big deal.
In this dark bedroom, the dead girl's bedroom, the room's completely dark, and then she takes a selfie, and all we see in the darkness is the cell phone lighted face with this big braced smile. And it's one of the creepiest fucking images I've ever seen in a movie.
Right.
And it's this stuff that she's doing that is getting her access to the auction on the dark web that she can now bet. And this is where I will bring it back. I got the Uncut Gems.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because the ending of Uncut Gems is Adam Sandler has like locked his like brother and brother-in-law and this other gangster in like he's locked them in like a room, and he's forced them to sit there while they're watching a sporting event, a basketball game that he's bet everything on. And I was watching Uncut Gems going, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I'm like, why do I care? It's not my money.
Yeah.
And Kellyanne sits down to play this high-stake Bitcoin poker, online poker.
Yeah.
And we are going through this suspense where it's like my brain is doing like I don't want her to get the money. I don't want her, but at the same time, it's like my brain is understanding her as the protagonist. I need her to win so that she can fulfill. And she's, this high stakes gambling of depraved human being gambling. And the suspense that I felt watching her play poker was the same exact feeling I got watching Adam Sandler watch basketball at the end of Uncut Gems,
Right.
where like
Okay.
I found myself going, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, what's going to happen? Is she going to win? Is she going to win?" And then like I had to step back and go, "Why do I care? Like this
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
real. It's not my
Right.
money. Like it's not
Right.
like I
Right.
have money going on. It's not like I'm going to lose 21 Bitcoin over this. Like
Right. No, yeah, I know. And that's a good example. Those two scenes that you just talked about are great examples of what we've been discussing, where it's like um it's just her clicking on things on a screen and numbers, but yet you're sitting here having this reaction to it because of the filmmaker like having respect for the audience and for them to know, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's at stake, this is what's going to happen if she wins, this is what could happen when she loses. No one's holding your hand. And another thing I was going to say was about that sequence where she breaks into the girl's bedroom. It's interesting because we had the sampler for the movie. I'm watching it, and it's like so quiet during that scene, and she's very still in a couple of moments in that scene where I was like, "Oh, did this freeze or something?" And it's just because it's so quiet, and I think that that's a brave choice in a movie too. To have moments where it's like so quiet that you don't even know if the movie's fucking going or not. But yet it has this like haunting aspect to it, like you said, with her taking these pictures. Like, to me, that's gonna stick with me a lot. Just her in that bedroom smiling, taking the like and it's so funny because what they could show based on this movie like would still bother me, right? They could show people being cut open and all this kind of horrible stuff, but what they show is haunting enough, and it's all about what's implied. All about like what has happened, but you don't see what has happened. And that's really the key to horror, is making your imagination do all the work.
yeah. That's why I mean I don't think this is at all a traditional horror movie, but the
No.
way I felt watching this
Yeah. It was a horror movie.
is 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 why it's going to rank very highly. It's funny. I saw this 2 days after I saw Strange Darling,
Mm-hmm.
and I think both of those movies are they're not really similar, but they're similar in the sense that there's horror. There's so much like horror aspect to them
Yeah.
without them being traditionally horror. And I think right now they are my number one and two, not just favorite, where I would rank them as my top two horror movies of the year, but my top two movies of 2024 right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know what? There's not a lot of things that are similar between the two movies, but what is similar is that you're watching the movie and your brain is programmed to think, okay, this is going to happen next. This is what the main point is. And for both Strange Darling and this, there's an excitement because you're like, I don't really understand what they're trying to do here. I don't really know what's going to happen next. And 99.8% of the things that we review, I do not have that feeling. But for
Yeah,
these two movies, I do, you know?
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really glad you made me watch it. I know I was ambiguous with you in our chat as to whether I liked it or not, but I kind of wanted to make it more fresh when we had a discussion today. But no, I did like it a lot too. I have not seen anywhere near as much horror as you this year, so I can't say if this is in my top five or so, right? But it's a very strong contender. I still have to see like a lot of other horror movies though to make sure this one ranks as high. So was there anything else you wanted to say about
Uh,
Red Rooms?
just again, if you are in the New York area, it is back in theaters. You can go see this at the IFC Center on Broadway and West Fourth in Manhattan, in the West Village, and that's a great movie theater to support. Anyway, I was like, it was really awesome being there in a packed theater, getting to see the writer director Pascal Plante. Who's like also freakishly like a young guy. Like he looks like he's like in his early 30s. Like I don't know how old he is, but I was like, if he's making movies like this now, like I can't wait to see. And it's funny because again, like I saw this 2 days after Strange Darling, and I thought the same thing about like JT Molnar, like the writer director of that movie, where it's like I have to like start looking this guy up and finding out what else he's done and looking to see if I can find those movies because I'm just so interested in like what they've done and now what they're going to do in the future.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Yeah, I am absolutely interested in both of them. I started following JT Molnar on Twitter. I have to look into this director as well. But yeah, I am interested to see what they're going to make for both of these. Really good, kind of bookends for this week. We covered Strange Darling last week. We covered this. As you know, as we start to plug things, Danny and I are also covering Horror's Greatest on Shudder. Do you want to tell people what else they can check out on our channel?
We did you said it. We did a full review of Strange Darling, Horror's Greatest, episodes 1 and 2, which is on Shudder. We're going to be getting into a couple more things now as we get closer to October. I think there's like that Rosemary's Baby series that's going to be out soon. Apartment 7A, I think it's called.
Right.
That we might start covering. We're going to do a book review very soon to get back to our interview with a vampire audience. I just finished The Vampire Lestat, which is one of your favorite books, and I think you're rereading it. So we'll definitely be talking about that very soon.
Fuck yeah!
And next week we'll be back with episode 3 of Horror's Greatest, and maybe we'll do a. Are you taking Pepper and Clem to see Beetlejuice too?
Okay, here's the deal, right? I wouldn't take Clem to see it, but I am considering taking Pepper. It's so funny, like what we actually get to see in my household and what we don't. And for the longest time, Beetlejuice wasn't on my radar. I was like, I don't want to see another fucking Legacy sequel. But everyone keeps saying it's really great.
Yeah, my cousin texted me yesterday and told me that him and his girlfriend had just saw it and they loved it. So
yeah,
Charlotte wants to see it. I'm definitely going to take her at some point this weekend if we have any free time. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So maybe we talk about that next week.
Yeah, get a little Tim Burton action in here. Yeah. Cleanse our palate after this disturbing movie. But guys, if you've seen Red Rooms, please let us know what you thought about it in the comments. Make sure that you subscribe to the Lastercast too, because as you can see, Danny is a video making machine and he will give you all the reviews you could want within 1 week. But we will be back next week for some more Horror's Greatest, and I'm sure whatever else is worth talking about. See y'all.